You're listening to the ProgAxia podcast.
Hi everybody, it's Andy here, and I've got Paul with me. Hi Paul, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Hi.
Now we're going to do something which I've been threatening to do for a while. We've sort of had a little bit of hiatus on the podcast where the years are concerned. But for anybody who doesn't know, I do a radio show which I actually sort of do the best of a specific year, and I've been going through the 70s. Which has been incredibly interesting, going back on some of these albums, man. It's been really, really enjoyable for me. So we're going to go through 74, the best progressive rock of 1974. It is subjective. It's, my show. I put those tracks on. There's loads of stuff that I have to miss off normally because, these years are fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah. And this is when prog progressive rock was really hitting its stride, I think. If we say it started very late 60s, now here we are 5-6 years in, bunch of albums, a bunch of groups we're going to talk about have released several by now or by then. So and it's been great. I've had a load of people, surprising number, and it's been great, saying, hey, when's the next one? Because actually we're waiting for 74. So a little bit of a hiatus, but there's been live music again. We've had stuff.
Exactly. And we went down to Prog for Piet, which was really good.
Yeah.
You going to Prog? Was it Prog the Forest? Prog the Forest.
I'm not going to be able to make that, but there's been HRH Prog. There's a few of those coming up. Trading Boundaries. I'll be at Marillion. You and I.
I'm going to Marillion. I should see you there.
Yep. Well, I'll see the back of your head. You're 2 rows.
You'll see the back of my head. Yeah, I got a good ticket for that one.
Yeah.
I wonder how I got that. That was through a mate of mine, I'm sure. Yeah, it was you. So thanks for that. No, it was it's great having the live shows back on and just being able to go out and see some live music. It's just been absolutely amazing. So where do you want to start with this? Which albums do you want to start with, Paul? I'll give you the choice of starting with whichever one you want.
Well, I mean, one of the albums, and it was early on in your list, which is routinely held up as one of the great albums of all time, one of the great concept albums of all time. And I happen to have it here.
Let's start with the biggie first. Let's go with Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Genesis. On the show, I played a few tracks. Yeah, fantastic. I've got it here as well. I played a few tracks for this because I couldn't play one track. I mean, I've got to tell you, this is probably one of my favorite albums of this year. Lamb Lies Down completely blew me away. It was different from sort of anything else that Genesis had done. I mean, it was and consciously different. It was created as, I think Peter Gabriel sort of basically created it as something which was a departure from the usual sort of English gentleness that the Genesis had, and it's a fantastic album. I've got a confession to make. When I was doing the show, as you know, you have to concentrate, and I decided I was going to play Lamb Lies Down Broadway, Flying the Windshield, which I just absolutely love, and Broadway Melody of 1974 because it's a fantastic track. It wasn't until I listened to the show afterwards, that I realised I also played Cuckoo Cocoon as well.
Wow.
I had because it just flows. Everything just flows so beautifully. And I think what happened was when I was doing the show, I was listening to it and I was thinking, I love this. I just love this. And I just kept it going. I thought, I better get back in. So I sort of got 4 tracks in there, which I should have only had 3, but oh well, never mind, eh? So it's for me, it's just an incredible album. How about you?
Absolutely, and you're right. It does have a different what would be the cleverest word for it? Sound texture, because it doesn't have so much of the pastoral, the 12-string, all that stuff we'd heard before, even on the previous album. So it was it was rockier. Like all Genesis albums of this era, starts really strongly. I mean, Tony Banks's piano intro to the Lamb itself, then it comes in with the bass. It's great. And we're both sort of holding up the artwork, the album. I mean, this intrigued me as a lot of artwork did, but you've got kind of a meta thing going here with the person staring. You've got the story inside, and you've got Faces on the Back, and so you throw yourself into it like all good prog rock and prog rock concept albums. You immerse yourself into it. You're trying to work out what's going on. Again, some weird stuff going on, and fantastic. To me, though, it's three sides worth of good music, and I think the story's now fairly well known that Gabriel was struggling to finish the lyrics and some of it, and the other guys were in the other room, weren't they, sort of waiting, coming up with some more interesting musical bits, but still very, very strong. And the other track for me, because Seconds Out is such a big album, The Carpet Crawlers. It's just it's got mood, it's got atmosphere, it's got Hackett doing what he does so well. So really strong album. Really strong.
I mean, when you think about how prolific Genesis were, I mean, I was just thinking about this. I was actually talking to a mate of mine the other day about this, and he sort of mentioned there's every so often on an album there's a weak track or a few little weak bits and things like that. Now, personally, I don't really feel that. I feel that it yes, I think if you can be really critical about it and you can say there's a few bits and pieces on there like Waiting Room and things like that, but to me, I mean, and Waiting Room's 5 minutes or just over 5 minutes long, and arguably they could have left it out, but when I'm listening to this album, and I'm talking about actually sitting down headphones listening to the album, the whole thing just I can listen to the whole of it, and it's everything that is Genesis. But when you think about the how prolific they were over the years, I mean, right from 70 right through to the end of the decade, there was 9 albums. I mean, it must be 9 albums, I guess, with once Peter Gabriel left and Phil Collins had taken over. But right up to Wind and Wuthering, I mean, just that body of work, 1 album a year basically, even as a couple in, was it 77? I think it was, or 76.
76. Beginning and end.
Yeah, so a couple of albums in 76. When you think about that span of time, so they have to write an album, and every single one of them is mind blowing. The musicianship is incredible. Actually getting in and recording and touring all this, and then at the end of it, going into something like Lamb Lies Down, with Gabriel's era, the end of Gabriel's era, Lamb Lies Down. When you think those tracks like Lamb Lies Down, Fly in the Windshield, Broadway Melody, In the Cage is on there, Back in NYC, Counting Out Time, which I think is again, it's one of those tracks which it's not particularly Genesis, but within this body of work, this Lamb Lies Down on Broadway body of work, the double album, it sits there, and it's a quirky little funny thing, but it's sort of his, if you think about Rail's mindset at the time, and just like seeing it as whimsy and things like that. But then you've got Lamia and Supernatural, Anaesthetist, and all those sort of things. But then he goes into the sort of Colony of Slipper Men, and then you got Ravine, and Light Dies Down on Broadway, and then Ride the Screen, It, and the Rapids, and it just absolutely amazing how it sort of all come together, and they actually got it done. That's why we can sort of look at these albums as separate things, but when you think of that body of work from 70 right through to when Gabriel left in 74. It's astonishing, really, isn't it?
It is. And Genesis sometimes get accused of being a bit fey, whimsy was the word you used, the pastoral stuff and so on. And there is that, but there is the light and shade. So the previous album, Dancing with the Moonlit Night, starts with a sort of like solo Gabriel, sort of like a cappella by himself sort of thing, but then it comes in with the bass and so on.
Yeah.
And on this album, I mean, the tracks you mentioned there, and if anyone hasn't heard it, Fly on a Windshield is fantastic. You've suddenly got that moment when it comes in. It's like Supper's Ready with Apocalypse in 9/8. When Genesis wanted to rock, they could put all this stuff together, and it's powerful. And you're right. Back in NYC, that's this is never mind Otis Redding. This is Gabriel going punk, isn't it? At this stage. So.
Well, do and back in NYC was when we went to see Six of the Best. that's what they come on with. They come on. I think I mean, my memory is really bad at the best of times, but we've spoken about this. I mean, my friends have spoken about this since then, and I can remember them coming on in a coffin. And it starts off with Back in NYC. That gig started off with Back in NYC, and it was like, what a perfect way to start that Six of the Best gig with Gabriel coming back.
Yep.
Even though it was pissing with rain all day, and it didn't matter.
It wasn't going to rain on your parade.
It didn't rain on my parade, no. But yeah, and if you actually look at some of the lyrics on this album as well, it's stunningly good lyrics. Because I think the thing is, right, if you think about the time when I got into Genesis was probably sort of 76 realistically. 76, 77 was when I was like really in Genesis. Used to go and see them. Obviously, without Gabriel, I was a bit late to the game with that, like a lot of people my age. But getting that album, I remember sort of getting this, and it just fascinated me. America fascinated me anyway when I was 16, 17. I wanted to go there. You see all the TV programs, and you see these pictures of New York, and you see the sidewalk steam coming off the sidewalk, and you know these different places. And this album sort of just encapsulated that vibe in such a way that it was intoxicating in some ways, So, and as I say, sort of pulled it away from that English progressive rock, which I think was a brave move in some ways, although I think it was really needed. I think they just needed something else to do. But, Flying the Windshield, as you say, I mean, to me, that was, when that comes in, that is probably one of the most powerful entrances to a song that I think I've ever heard. And we talk about sort of things like heavy metal and stuff like this. Is heavier than any of that sort of stuff. Just the vibe of it. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about Crimson's Red later, aren't we? Some of the lyrics are a little bit forced, but there's always stuff that I learned. So again, when this came out, I didn't know who the Lamia were. I didn't realise this was actually a thing. I just thought he'd made it up. The previous album, I didn't know who Father Tiresias was. I just thought, perhaps it's a good rhyme, man. So I didn't know who Marshall McLuhan was, and now I know the medium is a message. But sometimes it just strains a little bit. So because I remember inside the album, Rail likes a good time. I like a good rhyme. So if his story doesn't stand, I might lend a hand. You understand, i.e. the rhyme is planned. I mean, it's like some of it was a bit...
It is. And again, when I got the album and I started, this is this huge story in the middle of it. I got to admit, I never read that when I was a kid. When I got it, I probably started and I went, nah. I mean, I've read it since, and it's okay. It's okay. But what always I loved was like reading the lyrics, just going through the lyrics with the album, and it just brought it all to life. So all in all, an absolutely fantastic album. And I say them, I tell you the lyrics. I'm thinking of like Broadway Melody in 1974, things like that. Where you got Ku Klux Klan, sort of Hot Soul Food, and the band plays in the mood and all that sort of stuff. I love
Carl Cheeseman sniffs the air.
Yes. Carl Cheeseman sniffs the air and leads the parade. He knows in a cent you can bottle all you made. And the melody on that stuff is just superb. So
where should
big thumbs up for Lamb Lies Down. Let's stick that to one side. Well, you mentioned King Crimson, and that was they had a couple of albums out there. I put a track on the show of from both of those albums. Which one do you want to go first? Starless and Bible Black?
Yes, or as Bill Bruford used to call it, braless and slightly slack. as you may know.
See, that's the sort of thing that it's whimsical, and I think this is the same thing with the Genesis thing. It's just like silly, whimsical things. I've got to say, I mean, I'm not the greatest King Crimson fan in the world, but my God, This is a really good album. This is a fantastic album. And I've got to tell you, I think the title of this, beautiful. I think the title of this album is probably the best title of any progressive rock album of any time.
Oh.
I mean, Starless and Bible Black is just a brilliant, brilliant title for an album. I mean, it is. And I love the album cover as well. I think the album cover is really good as well.
I think I didn't know you were going to go there. It's Tom Phillips. It's Tom Phillips that did the artwork, because I think he did some stuff for Eno as well, didn't he? Another Green World, maybe. Great album. Absolutely great. I am a big Crimson fan, as you and others know. It was Great Deceiver you chose, didn't you, for this? So, as people may or may not know, because Crimson are doing a lot of touring, a lot of improv as they do it in a live setting, and they are brilliant at it. I mean, this lineup. So as well as Fripp, Wetton, Bill Bruford, David Cross, Jamie Muir had gone off to pursue other things. I mean, The Great Deceiver is a title of two double CDs that came out later, live albums. So, and I read somewhere that this was called in the studio. It was called McLaughlin Number 5 or something like that, as a tribute to that great man.
Yeah.
But I mean, if anyone
the other track that I put The Great Deceiver on the show. And listening back to it, I sort of wish I put Fracture on.
Now, Fracture is one of those incredible tracks. I mean,
it's a better track than The Great Deceiver, I think. I mean, but it was only when I was doing the show, I was thinking, my thought process for me was, when I used to go to parties, with all the other prog heads, The Great Deceiver used to come on quite often, because it's a sort of a good party track in some ways. It really rocks. But then listening back on the album again and again and again over the last sort of 3-4 months, I've been thinking Fracture is just a much better track. I wish I'd put that one on, because it is astonishing. I love that track.
It is astonishing. If anyone hasn't heard it, please go and play it. What Robert Fripp does on that is amazing. So I think guitar shop people around the world get slightly fed up if someone comes in and plays Stairway to Heaven again. If you go into a guitar shop and play Fracture, then they'd offer you the keys to the kingdom, possibly.
Give you a discount on your guitar at least.
Exactly. It's one of those. If you think you're a good guitarist, try and play it, because it is quite amazing. Yeah, Fracture. There's not that many live recordings of it I'm aware of. But Great Deceiver, it's still a great track. It really rocks. The interplay, again, I really like. John Wetton and Bill Bruford were an amazing backline. Call them a backline. Do you want to call them a backline? What they could do, the interplay between them, almost telepathic.
Yeah, rhythm section is probably a more respectful way of saying it, because I'm part of a rhythm section. I'm not part of the backline.
I think Bruford was always keen to say he was a percussionist, wasn't he? Because what he used to do with all sorts of bits of skin and metal was amazing, and they were incredible. I think Fripp's on record was saying it was terrible to try and play over, but when you got it right, then my God, it was good. And this album, this album, as you may well know, is largely a live album. It's a live album. They took out the applause from and everything. So I think there's only about 10 or 12 minutes of actually new studio stuff. The rest of it is just taken from, I think, largely Dutch recordings. I don't know. Stand to be corrected on that.
No, I think it was Amsterdam. Yeah.
Yeah. So you listen to this, and this is largely lifted from mixing desk tapes. And it's like, this is what they could do live. I think it's phenomenal. It really, and the previous, with Islands, it's kind of drifting a bit for me. We spoke about that stuff like Formentera Lady and so on. And Palmer James, I think, I'm 99% sure, came on board for this. I can't see his name. Anyway, Palmer James started out with Supertramp. He come on to help out with lyrics and things with John Wetton. So, and Trio. I think Bruford is credited with admirable restraint on Trio, because he doesn't do anything apart from cross his arms.
It's that's the only thing I talk about Crimson being a little spotty, and I think Trio and Mincer, I could do without sort of. But then again, they're not the tracks that I've sat down and properly listened to. I mean, I'm damn sure that you love them.
Yeah.
But I just think they're they just feel like a little bit fillery to me. But that's just me, because I'm not a massive Crimson fan. I do love Crimson, but I don't, I'm not as big a fan as you are by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing that, you mentioned John McLaughlin, and you can sort of hear that Fripp's listened to Mahavishnu Orchestra, like Birds of Fire, which came out the year before. There's a song on there called Hope, and when you listen to Fracture, you feel like there's a little bit of Mahavishnu sitting in there somewhere. You can sort of tell the influence that he's got, especially because he's got that drumming, he's got the violin sound on it, and it's got that sort of Mahavishnu vibe to it as well, especially at the end. I think there's but that's what happens in music. You sort of get a vibe for something, you think, oh, that sounds really good, I'll give that a go. But that's why I think I love Fracture as well. It does remind me a little bit of Mahavishnu, but it's sort of a lot more solid.
Yes.
It's just it's more rocky, I guess, with Crimson.
Yeah.
But yeah, great tracks on there.
Dense. I would say dense. I mean, Fracture's, I think, very dense.
Yes, yeah.
There's not a lot of air to breathe on Fracture, but my God, it's a great song.
Yeah. And what about Red? Let's talk about Red.
During Crimson, let me reach down and pick out Red.
Yeah, let's take a big dip into the Crimson pool here. Yeah, fantastic album. Down to 3. Even though, David Cross was still on this, wasn't he? He still played violin and keys and other bits and pieces on here.
I think so, but I'm not sure. I've heard that because he's credited on the back with thanks to, but I think what actually happened is that he'd sketched out his parts for it, but then it was Mel Collins and Ian MacDonald that came in. I think basically, did what he had sort of like set down. So I'm not quite sure how much he did play on it, but I'm sure he did play some. Anyway,
yeah, I'm sure he was on there as well. Even though he wasn't sort of part of the band, because it was there and then there were 3 sort of moment, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then there were none really, because they all thought it was going great. They're actually doing quite well commercially, selling out bigger venues and arenas and so on. And that's when Fripp decided, no, enough of this. There's got to be another way. The other 2 were slightly surprised, but as you may well know, this is a very heavy album. Yeah, you mentioned about heavy metal earlier when we were talking a little bit about Genesis. This apparently was Kurt Cobain's favourite album. There's a lot of heaviness on there, and one of the most played of the tracks, Starless, which takes its time. But the ability to build and hold tension before you get the release, and then it comes back in again, and the vocal line is fantastic. They're still in the set to this day. Tony Levin doing what John Wetton did. It's fantastic. It really is. But it's a heavy, dark, dense album. Yeah, this is no holding hands, running around in the poppy fields type of album.
No, and right from the beginning as well. Just from the sort of opening bars of Red. Again, there's a Mahavishnu sort of little vibe going on in that as well. That sort of sound. But it gets into a killer riff from Fripp on this, just absolutely fantastic. And as you say, Starless as well. I think Starless is probably one of my favourite tracks on that album, in a way. Just a beautiful, lamentful song with John Wetton's singing on it. It just really is a fantastic track, but King Crimson's always taken a little while for me to get into Crimson properly, but I think doing the podcast with you has actually helped, because it's made me go back and listen to those albums again. And Starless is great. I think One More Red Nightmare, which is the track I put on, I think I mean, I love the opening riff of that, and Bruford's drumming is so Bruford on that.
It's manic but controlled, isn't it? I mean, it's for me, One More Red Nightmare. It's great. Fripp is brilliant on it. McDonald's great on it. So for me, it's one of those tracks that kind of grips you, and it always seems to be lurching, but they keep it together. It's very cohesive. And it's like, how many bands can really pull off stuff like this? And they were one of the few. So and
there really is I mean, they are completely unique in their sound. Like all the progressive rock bands that we truly love. It's not just like playing progressive rock music. It's like they are. You put it on and you go, that's Crimson. Just Crimson all over. Because another track on that, Fallen Angel, is. Man, that is so good, and I think that's where you can hear a bit of David Cross at the beginning of that, But again, another amazing performance from John Wetton on vocals.
Yeah,
I just love that. So I mean, to me, this is probably my favourite Crimson album, sort of by a long way, because every track is really, really good. I mean, Providence, again, a little bit sparse, a little bit rambling for me. Just we should get their teeth into something. It sounds a little bit like a jam, but which it probably was. But yeah, I think on the whole, I think it's just probably one of my favourite King Crimson albums. And down to 3-piece as well.
This and one we discussed last time, Lark's Tongues and Aspic. These are the two for me.
I love that album as well. Love that album as well.
Yes.
Let's move on to another biggie of that year, which was this one, Relayer. Where's my camera? There it is.
Yes.
I got to tell you, one of my favourite Yes albums. Not every Yes fan's favourite album, but I do love this album. I think it's one of the standout albums that they ever did. And of course, Patrick Moraz, not Waitman.
Yep.
All the lyrics on the inner sleeve as well, which is, I always love this, having lyrics with an album. That's why I love vinyl so much, because it gives you the opportunity to do these fantastic, artworks. And again, another Roger Dean artwork, and very different for Roger Dean as well. I think sort of the graininess of it, which I think suited it, because it's sort of battles and dark and all that sort of thing. What did you think of Patrick Moraz's keyboards on this?
So at the time, it was a bit of a stretch for me at the time. Now I love it. I actually love this album. Everything about it. We've both been holding up the album sleeve, and I think it really works well. The music really complements it. Seem to be creating the same soundscape, sound world, whatever. So Moraz's jazz inflections, I mean, there's a bit of jazz but if you mention the word jazz too often, it makes it sound like this is a jazz album, and it's not. I think it's got some jazz inflections to it. And the previous album, which you really like and I really don't, and
you can say the name. Tales from Topographic Oceans is a great album.
Yeah, if you say something 3 times, they appear, don't they, or something? So
that's right. Yeah.
So
Beetlejuice.
Yes, exactly. On that album, you had sort of a bit of uncontrolled percussive mayhem that, which I wasn't quite convinced about. But on this album, now you've got some bits where they just sort of seem to go for it, but it seems to work better for me. Yeah. And Steve Howe's guitar sound is quite different. Telecaster dominating it, so it's a
he used a Telecaster rather than his old Gibson for this, didn't
exactly. So it's a sort of harsher, more strident sound, but I think it works. And what was it? I was thinking the other day. So this album, I mean, that album whose name I won't mention. I mean, it was that one track with 4 movements or 4 tracks. If it was one track with 4 movement, then you've got Close to the Edge, which had 3 tracks, that album which had 1, and this album which has 3. I mean, they were stretching out, weren't they? They were giving themselves space. They But yeah, it's really grown on me. I love it. And Trading Boundaries, a wonderful, small, intimate venue down in Sussex, West Sussex, Fletching. Roger Dean's got some studio there, and you can buy stuff, including limited edition prints of stuff like this. So if you want to give yourself a treat for Christmas, boys and girls, get this on your wall. I love it. So yeah, the music, the artwork, slightly different style. It sounded to me like a band. It didn't sound like because White was new to it, wasn't he? He was new to the group, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Mraz's first and only. But to me, it all works. John Anderson's lyrics. I mean, if you read Sound Chaser, which is one you chose, if you sort of read it straight off the page, and you do scratch your head a bit. But like a lot of Anderson stuff, you play the music at the same time, and you go, yeah, I can see how that works, but just don't ask me to explain it to anyone.
See, that's the amazing thing about Yes for me was it was always that when you read the lyrics, they are very beautiful lyrics, but if you just read the lyrics, if you said, "Oh, this is the band I'm listening to," ever read those lyrics, they're really good. You just look at them and go, "Doesn't make any sense whatsoever." But somehow, once it's actually that sort of poetry is put into this poetic music, it just feels so right. And when you're listening to it, you feel like you understand what's going on.
Yeah,
I don't understand that, but it does. It just fits so beautifully well.
Yeah,
because I think with also with Patrick Moraz, and I think we've got to sort of say this. Patrick Moraz, for me, made this album beautiful. His keyboard playing on this, I think, is astounding. A lot of Yes fans love Wakeman, and as do I. I mean, I love Rick Wakeman. In the stuff that he's done with Yes has just been mind-blowing. It's just absolutely wonderful, especially on things like Close to the Edge. It's incredible. But when they brought in Patrick Moraz, you didn't know whether it was going to work or not, and I actually think it wouldn't be the same without it just wouldn't be the same album. It'd be sometimes I feel like Wakeman sort of overdoes it a little bit. He sort of this just sort of sat there perfectly. The solos on it are great. The landscapes, that keyboard landscape that he puts in the back of some of this stuff it just really, really works on the album. Because they auditioned several musicians for this, including Vangelis at one point, but apparently he didn't want to leave home and he wouldn't get on a plane and things like that. So touring might have been a little bit difficult.
Him and John Anderson obviously stayed friends.
Yeah, they obviously did. Yes, Heaven and Hell album, wasn't it? They did, and other bits and pieces. They had a single as well, didn't they, John and Vangelis?
Wasn't
so
the guy
far away, so clear, or something, wasn't it? If I remember
clear as now, or something, wasn't it? Hear me now, I think.
So far away, so clear. I'm sure it is something like that. Anyway, which is okay. I mean, it wasn't the sort of thing that I particularly liked at the time, and I'm guessing it would probably be okay now if I listen to it again. But I remember at the time I was, it's okay. But yeah, Patrick Moraz, absolutely brilliant. Come out of Refugee, which was sort of that sort of formation or reformation of the Nice.
Yes.
And I've got a Refugee track on this as well, which I really, really like. I do like that album. It's only like I think I only had one album, but
yes.
Absolutely fantastic. But yes, so this album, again, one of my biggest favourites of the Yes catalogue. And again, Steve Howe's work on this.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I mean, there's no one like Steve Howe. No one plays like Steve Howe.
Yeah, I agree. And the point about Wakeman's interesting, because if Wakeman in an alternative universe played on that album, because Wakeman's style is quite distinctive as well, isn't it? He tends to have those type of baroque arpeggios and all that, and that's what he'd be doing in lots of places where Moraz, perhaps from more of a sort of jazz stylings, just sort of sits back a bit and goes, no, now it's somebody else's turn, now it's somebody else's turn, and now it's me. So yes, it works really well. I agree.
Where do you want to go next? What about Power and the Glory album?
I was about to say exactly that, because that's
my love,
the love of my life, isn't it? Your strong suit. Them.
Yeah, A Gentle Giant, Power and the Glory. This is an album that I got into quite late. I'd already had a freehand. In fact, I'd already had Missing Piece and stuff like that by this time, and I probably got it around about sort of 78, something like that, and it completely passed me by. Even though I was, a big Gentle Giant fan, but it just for some reason it just completely passed me by. And I saw it in a record shop, and I looked at it, and I didn't like the album cover, and again just passed it by and didn't even think about it. And it wasn't until a little while after that I got that. But I mean, what do you think of the? Because you know what I'm going to say.
Well, yeah, you're much more the expert on the Gentle Giant. So, and whilst I am still a fan, and there's lots of stuff I like. We talked about Octopus, which is one of my favourites of all time. So for me, I mean, Gentle Giant is never going to be straightforward. There's always going to be intricacy to it. There's always going to be stuff that's interwoven, and so again, quite dense in that respect.
Yeah, they're complex by even prog standards, aren't they?
Yeah. And there's no one really quite like them in that regard. Well, possibly one or two, but not many. However, for me, this is on a Gentle Giant scale. For me, it's simpler. It's rockier. It's more straightforward. It's as commercial as they're kind of almost going to get, sort of thing. So that's I enjoy it. I enjoy it, but yeah, that's my take on it. But I bow to your knowledge. But when I hear stuff like which track did you use? It was playing the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, playing the game.
Yeah. So for me, it is Gentle Giant. You can tell it's just like when Fripp comes in with his guitar, you can tell it's Fripp, etc. But to me, this is a relatively more accessible side of Gentle Giant. I guess that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, definitely. And this whole album, I think, is for me is a really, really good album. But again, probably not their best album, but when you say not their best album for Gentle Giant, it's head and shoulders out of most of the stuff that was coming out at the time. But it has that, it starts off with Proclamation, which is like, typical Gentle Giant fashion, electric piano and that juxtaposed vocal line, which is what I love about Giant. Everything seems so effortlessly complex, effortless complexity is what I'm trying to say.
Effortless isn't an easy word to say.
It's getting late, mate. It's getting late in the day. I haven't had enough cups of tea. But it's effortless and it's complex and it just feels like I can't imagine how a bunch of musicians actually do that. I mean, I don't think I could play in a band like that. Even though we play sort of complex stuff sometimes, but just every track seems complex, but it doesn't feel like it is when you just listen to it, and it's brilliant. And you've got songs like Aspirations on there, which Kenny Minier was probably on vocals. We never sung live. I didn't realise this till
no.
Quite recently, but apparently he never sung live. I don't know if that's just I don't know, a rumor or something like that, but someone was telling me he just never sung live. He just didn't want, either he didn't want to sing live or just wasn't powerful, because he had that really soft voice. And Aspirations is a great track. It's also the piano on that always reminds me for some reason of the piano sound on No Quarter by Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
That sort of phased tinkly piano, it does remind me of that. But yeah, playing the game, I think easy to get into, more straightforward track. Love it though. Cogs Within Cogs is great. In fact, because it's a bit of a loose concept album as well, sort of about politicians that sort of come into politics with all the best will in the world, but end up screwing it up.
Don't they try and use chess as a metaphor as well? Isn't that what's going on here? I think.
Yeah, there's lots of things in this that when you listen to it the first time, you think it's just another Gentle Giant album. Then you start getting into it, you read a little bit about it, go through the cover and all the rest of it, and you do sort of just grows and grows and grows. And although I say it's not one of my favourites or it's not one of the best, I think it is definitely up there. I mean, it's scraping just below albums like Freehand and Octopus for me. And there's a couple of tracks on them that I think are just some of the best Gentle Giant that I've heard.
Well, Proclamation is the one that sort of broke the prog internet, wasn't it? Last year, wasn't it? When they did the video with all the people around the world joining in. I mean, it's one heck of an idea. And if anyone hasn't seen that video, then
look that up. Yeah, I mean, if we can find it, I'll stick a link into it below, because
amazing.
Again, it's amazing. It's just a Gentle Giant fans just going, let's give this a bash.
Yeah, exactly.
And did a great job on it as well.
That's
I mean,
fantastic.
it's a really, really good job. But Derek Shawn takes most of the vocals on this. Kerry Minnear on the softer parts. But as I say, Kerry really never sort of did, vocals live. The thing that I noticed as well, and I don't know if you noticed, but when you listen to Return to Forever, sometimes you sort of hear Gentle Giant in the background, or the influence of Gentle Giant. I'm just wondering if they actually listen to Gentle Giant, because there's some bits in the Return to Forever album, because I've been playing a bit of that. That you sort of think that sounds a bit Gentle Giant, but you're right. I think they lost a bit of the acousticness of the past, and which I think, which is probably why it just pulls it slightly down from some of those other albums that I love from Gentle Giant. I'd like to have just had a bit more acousticness in there.
There's a bit of a theme there, isn't there? Because we just said no, Lamb. Lamb is less of the pastoral elements. This has got less of it. And the Yes album, Relay, which we've just been talking about, doesn't have the tinkling streams and stuff so much, does it? So it's a harsh and more strident sound.
Yeah, maybe it was just the sort of the way music was going, like let's do more plugged in stuff, and it might have something to do. I mean, you said that it might have something to do with the idea that they have to tour it, and it's a lot easier to do it without acoustics, because it's just another layer of complexity, I guess, which that might have something to do with it. I've never really thought of that before, but
Yeah, I mean, Genesis, Gabriel had to keep telling stories because
tuning up the 12 strings
and Banks were all busy trying to tune their 12 strings. But then they put on something like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and the costumes didn't work, and the backdrop and the screens at the back kept on not working as well, did they? So there you go.
See, that's another thing. I was saying about putting all this effort and work in and getting albums together and doing shows and stuff like that. When Genesis did that, they had the three screens at the back and all that sort of stuff, and it just sort of it's getting a bit darker earlier, isn't it?
Yeah.
So won't be able to see you, just just see these little eyes sticking out the dark.
Gollum, my precious. Yes, I made these. Yes.
Great album. Great album. Which one do you want to go to next?
What have I got down here? Oh, there we go. War Child, Jethro Tull.
Yeah. Okay, War Child.
You chose Skating Away, didn't you? On the film.
Yeah. The reason why I chose Skating Away, because it's such a huge, brilliant live track. Problem with me with this, I think, is that I'm not a lover of this album. It's sort of okay, and again, I'm a sort of big Tull fan. I love Tull, but Skating Away and Thin Ice of a New Day became a live classic. And I think they still play it even today, because it's such a great track. But the album just lacks a little bit for me. Things like Bungle in the Jungle and
yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's just
yes.
It's like they got there's two or three really good tracks on it, and then the rest seems to be, I've got this, and maybe we can put this on it, and I've got this other bit that I haven't quite written properly yet. It's sort of, and I hate to be negative on me. I'm always massively positive on albums and bands and stuff like that, but at the time it did disappoint me a little bit. I like Solitaire, or Only Solitaire, which I think is sort of much more Tully, but it's only like a minute and a half, so it doesn't sort of fill up much of the album.
The album, as I understand it, had quite sort of a curious gestation, didn't it? Because it was meant to be sort of a concept with a film and all the rest of it. which of course which Gabriel had in his head as well for Lamb.
Yes.
Although this may be hard to believe, but suspend your disbelief here. But apparently, there were some issues with Ian Anderson wanting to have complete creative control, and that led to some tension. So the album was kind of like half formed, really. It was meant to be something slightly different, and there's some. We talked about the Chateau Disaster, didn't we? Tapes, and I think Skating Away is one of the leftovers from that, and so it's a little bit cobbled together. The other way of looking at it, Andy, is after its two predecessors, A Passion Play and Thick as a Brick, it is that word again. It's a lot more accessible in that regard, even if some of it's a bit more throwaway. But yeah, it's quite a contrast to the previous two, which really were sit down and concentrate heavily for the next 40 minutes. This one was a bit like, okay, it's got some nice ditties on it. I can sing along to Skating Away. I can sing along to Bungalow in the Jungle, even if I don't want to. So I think it's a very different flavour of Tull album, isn't it? 'Cause,
To me, it's sort of like Tull by numbers, in some respects. Some of the tracks, some of the vocals are too low as well. When you listen to it, just the vocals don't really stand out. And tracks about sea lions and the Bungalow in the Jungle.
Sea lion,
Anyway, but as I say, it's redeemed for Skating Away, and again, as I say, it was a fantastic live, but not my favourite. Not my favourite.
It's where Ian Anderson tells us he can play saxophone as well, because there's a lot of sax, including something called a sopranino sax, which I've never heard of before. This is Ian Anderson's, I don't know, a little bit of an indulgence, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's right. But so let's put that one to one side. So let's just end it there, because I think for this one we'll have a part 2 of this, because there's still loads of tracks to talk about, and we'll be talking about things like Pete Hamill and other bits and pieces, which are absolutely fantastic. So join us again for part 2. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on the ProgAxia podcast. Don't forget to like this video, and also to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us. We'll see you next time.